Broadcasting across the United States, Canada, and around the world, this is the Bible Answer Man broadcast. Your host for the program is Hank Hanegraaff, president of the Christian Research Institute. We're on the air because life and truth matter. This is a live call-in program, so dial 888-ASK-HANK to ask your question now. Again, that's 888-275-4265. To start today's Bible Answer Man broadcast, here's your host, Hank Hanegraaff.
Thank you very much, Randy, with a reminder that you can also contact us via the mail at Box 8500, Charlotte, North Carolina, zip code 28271. Well, yesterday I began the broadcast by asking what racism, riots, and radicalism have in common. And then I proceeded to answer that question by demonstrating that all three, that racism, riots, and radicalism, are the ripened fruit of decades of educational indoctrination. Respecting racism, Darwin unambiguously connected the dots. In The Descent of Man, he made explicit that the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life applies not only to racehorses, but to human races. Thus, said Darwin, at some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races around the world. Well, not long after Darwin's racist epistle was published, it was institutionalized as the very backbone of a massive educational indoctrination project, a project buttressed in the celebrated edutainment movie titled Inherit the Wind. The centerpiece of that movie, the 1925 Scopes trial, and central to that trial, a text called A Civic Biology, a text used to convince impressionable students that humanity has an evolutionary hierarchy, that 5 races exist upon the earth. I mentioned them yesterday. The Negro type, they say, the Malay or brown race, the Indian or red race, the Mongolian or yellow race, and finally, well, the highest type of all, the Caucasians, represented by white inhabitants of Europe and America. The text goes so far as to say that the remedy for those not well born should be extermination. Well, today I want to extend the conversation by focusing on riots as the ripened fruit of the educational indoctrination of our youth. As Hitler infamously noted, he alone who owns the youth gains the future. Well, this morning, an article I read in USA Today has Kwame Christian, director of the American Negotiation Institute, seemingly justifying the looting of rioters by suggesting that some looters were undoubtedly expressing frustration or maybe trying to even a score. Robert C. Smith, emeritus professor of political science at San Francisco State University, supposed that the looting of rioters was simply, well, an organic expression of rage, lashing out not just against police abuses, but against the historic legacy of a society with its knee on the neck of protesters. What if he said big box stores and swanky malls were targeted because they were perceived symbols of economic inequity and institutional racism? And then he went on to suggest that the motive for looting may have been racial solidarity rather than self-indulgence. And Smith then concludes that looters were delivering a message, and thus griping about looting during demonstrations like complaining about thunder in a summer storm. Well, all of this adds up to a not-so-subtle rationalization of raiding, ransacking, robbery as a legitimate expression of racial solidarity. The issue of right or wrong was notably missing from the article. You might ask why. In answer, it is because, as the famed biologist and philosopher Alex Rosenberg has been telling students and readers for decades, in a world where physical facts fix all the facts, it's hard to see how there can be any room for moral facts. If Darwinism is true, then anything goes. We need to face the fact that nihilism is true, that there are no intrinsic moral values, that our core morality isn't true or right or correct, and that neither is any other. Nature just seduced us into thinking it's right, because nihilism denies that there's anything at all that is good in itself, or for that matter, bad in itself. And of course, I have communicated on this broadcast that if there are people troubled by immortality or immorality, Rosenberg has pithy answers. Is there a God? No. What is the nature of reality? What physics says it is. What is the purpose of the universe? There is none. What is the meaning of life? Ditto. Why am I here? Just dumb luck. Is there a soul? Is it immortal? Are you kidding? Is there free will? Not a chance. What happens when we die? Everything pretty much goes on, just like before, except us. What is the difference between right and wrong, good and bad? There is no moral difference between them. Why should I be moral? Well, it might make you feel better. Bottom line is anything goes. History doesn't have meaning or purpose, he says. It's full of sound and fury. It signifies nothing. Does the human past have any lessons for the future? He says fewer and fewer, if any to begin with. Because there is no meaning, because there is no purpose, because there is no immortality, no moral compass, no free will, Rosenberg counsels the scientistic to cultivate an Epicurean detachment. This is a disposition recommended by Epicurus, a Greek philosopher of the 4th century BC who believed that everything was basically, atoms moving on determined paths forever. Epicurus, he held that there was nothing more to the mind than physical matter and that immortality was out of the question. He equated the morally good with pleasure and evil with pain. That was the sum of it. If it gives you pleasure, whatever it is, it's morally good. Pain, pain is irredeemable. As for punishment, no one does wrong freely. There is no free will, so no one should really be punished. The rampant raiding and ransacking and robbery are the collective consequence of atoms moving on determined paths forever. Well, of course, there is a better way. When the barbarians destroyed the Roman Empire in the West, it was the Christian church that was on the vanguard of demonstrating that truth matters, that truth really, really matters. Far from being mere molecules in motion, we're created in the image and likeness of God. Thus, what we do now counts for all eternity. Racism and rioting are extravagant evils that have consequences now and for eternity. So rather than the church drinking the Kool-Aid and becoming microcosms of the culture, the church must stand out, must embrace the worldview that gave us this civilization, a worldview without which this civilization will surely fall, just as the bleached bones of the Roman Empire or the great Greek culture that fell suddenly remind us. And by the way, a reminder to stand shoulder to shoulder with us in the battle for life and truth. We speak truth to power, truth to our culture, no matter what the cost. You can give in a safe, secure fashion on the web at equip.org. We'll be right back with answers to your questions.
God brings certain books and people into our lives precisely when we need them. Never Give Up is one of those books, and K.P. Yohannan is one of those people. Never Give Up is the perfect book for this precise moment in history. To receive your copy of Never Give Up, The Story of a Broken Man Impacting a Generation by K.P. Yohannan, call 888-7000-CRI and make a gift to support the Christian Research Institute's life-changing outreaches during the financially critical month of June. 888-7000-CRI, or visit us at equip.org. The Bible Answer Man will return in just a few moments. The Christian Research Journal is CRI's award-winning magazine, combining eye-catching design with well-researched articles to equip believers in doctrine, defense, and discernment. The Christian Research Journal's primary commitment is to contend earnestly for the faith that was once for all delivered to the saints. In keeping with this commitment, the journal's mission is both evangelistic and pastoral, furthering the proclamation and defense of the historic gospel of Jesus Christ, and helping his followers distinguish between essential Christian doctrine and doctrine that is peripheral, aberrant, or heretical. In an age of subjectivism and moral relativism, may Christians ground their faith and values in the objective, reliable testimony of Holy Scripture. Start your subscription to the Christian Research Journal today. Call 888-7000-CRI or go online to equip.org. That's equip.org. Are you the product of millions of years of unguided, purposeless, natural processes? Or are you created in the image of a loving God? Faced with the overwhelming scorn of evolutionary proselytizers, it can be hard to articulate the truth about God's creative work. And even among faithful Christians, many misconceptions linger. The Creation Answer book by Hank Hanegraaff puts answers to the most hotly debated origins questions right at your fingertips, giving you clarity and understanding. Learn to articulate the truth about our origins clearly and compassionately when you request your copy of the Creation Answer book, or listen to Hank's insightful answers with the unabridged audiobook version on CD. Receive your copy of the Creation Answer book or the audiobook on CD from the Christian Research Institute when you call 888-7000-CRI or go online to equip.org.
We've seen good times and hard times, but nothing quite like these times. The consequences of the coronavirus pandemic and massive urban unrest have been nothing short of shocking. In such times, people desperately need hope and courage. God brings certain books and people into our lives precisely when we need them. Never Give Up is one of those books, and K.P. Yohannan is one of those people. Through times of trial, we come to know what it truly means to know Christ. Simply put, Never Give Up, the story of a broken man impacting a generation, is the perfect book for this precise moment in history. To receive your copy of Never Give Up, the story of a broken man impacting a generation, call 888-7000-CRI and make a gift to support the Christian Research Institute's life-changing outreaches, 888-7000-CRI, or visit us at equip.org.
And now, here's Hank Hanegraaff.
Thank you very much, Randy. Let's go to our phone callers. The number to dial, 888-ASK-HANK, numerically 888-275-4265. Let's go to Pastor Harris in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Hi, Pastor Harris.
God bless you. I have a comment or two and a question.
Sure.
Can I first say the comment?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. In 2015 of June, was the guy from Nation of Islam, forgot his name, the leader of the Nation of Islam, he was 82 in 2015. I forgot the name. My mind is blank right now. The thing was that he preached a sermon in Mount Zion Missionary Baptist Church, and he preached, and he said exactly what they were going to do with this protest and these havocs. And
you're talking about Louis Farrakhan? Is that who you're talking about?
Louis Farrakhan,
yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
My mind went completely blank.
Okay.
Louis Farrakhan, and it was in June. In 2015, he preached that they was going to do exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
And can I play some of the audio? If it's okay with you.
Probably not.
Okay. Okay. The thing is that pretty much the information. And the other thing is that we are the African race is a very blessed race from the Lord. They have brought us lots of blessings. The one who held this cross for Jesus, Simon of Cyrene, he was African. Augustine of Hippo, he was African. And lots of the ones who decided the books in our Bibles were Africans, were bishops from Africa. And I had a question because I have a program on, it's called Getting to Know Jesus, and I need some information on Star David. And that's the information I need. I need to know whether they believe in the Trinity or not because of the comments I'm going to make on that.
Yeah. So you're asking about the Nation of Islam?
No, I just had a comment on the Nation of Islam because I had some audio from 2015.
Okay. So what are you asking about specifically? I'm sorry.
Just now.
What are you asking about specifically?
I would have asked that question about the Star David. Do they believe in the Trinity? Do they hold the belief that God is 3 in 1?
Okay, I'm not sure what you're referring to when you're referring to the Star of David. Are you referring to a black
Star David, the black
Hebrew Israelite movement? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, the black Hebrew Israelite, the ones who say that Jesus is black, and they are called Star David.
Yeah, well, there are many different problems with the black Hebrew Israelite movement. We've often said that the cults are the unpaid bills of the church, and the black Hebrew Israelite movement is no exception, because they have succeeded in infiltrating black communities with a false gospel due to biblical and historical illiteracy on the part of Christians. That's how they've gotten away with it. And there are several characters who are instrumental in forwarding the notion that the African Americans are the true descendants of biblical Hebrews. One is a guy by the name of Frank Cherry, and we wrote about this in the Christian Research Journal, so you can find the articles online at equip.org. The other is a guy by the name of William Crowdy. And during the Jim Crow era, Crowdy claimed to receive a divine revelation in which African Americans were rendered descendants of ancient Israelites. And so Cherry and Crowdy together laid out the foundation for what came to be known as this black Israelite Hebrew Israelitism. And there's so many problems, it is hard to mention all of them, but let me just mention a few. One is the problem of genealogy. The idea that blacks are Hebrew descendants of the 10 lost tribes of Israel. That is pure mythology. Another is racism. It is the idea that white people are descendants of Gehazi, who was cursed with leprosy, and thus they became white as snow. Again, this is a prostitution of the biblical text. Number 3, they are Judaizers. So they hold to strict compliance to Mosaic law. And in their view, the Old Testament has not been fulfilled, and therefore salvation is relegated to obedience to the complex mosaic of the law of Moses. And then there's this matter of misunderstanding language. According to Black Hebrew Israelites, it is misguided as at the very least, to use the term Jesus. Instead, they make it incumbent upon adherents to use the Hebrew rendering Yeshua. And I could go on and on with this, but we have written several articles in the Christian Research Journal. I also did a podcast on this, and in both of them, we found that there was a tremendous amount of interest because of the proliferation of the Black Hebrew Israelite movement. So if you want further information, the podcast, equip.org, and then also the articles on the web. By the way, written by Vocab Malone, and the podcast is with Vocab as well. Let's go back to the phone lines and talk to William in South Carolina, listening on Sirius XM 131. Hi, William.
Hey, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Good. We've had some debate in our church, and I wanted to ask, is it wrong for a woman to host an open Bible study that may have men in it at the church?
No, it is not. If a woman is a qualified teacher, then she should be allowed to teach, and I don't think whether she's teaching men or women makes any difference whatsoever. I'm thinking right now about a passage that I was reading the other day in Acts chapter 18, where you have Apollos, who was a native of Alexandria. He comes to Ephesus, and by the way, he's described in the biblical text as a learned man with a thorough knowledge of the Scriptures. And he had been instructed in the way of the Lord, and he spoke with great fervor. He taught about Jesus accurately, though he knew only the baptism of John. So here's a learned man who speaks articulately, who is teaching, but he only has a partial truth to teach. He doesn't have the whole picture. So he begins to speak boldly in the synagogue. But Priscilla, a woman, along with Aquila, heard him, and as a result of hearing the inadequacy of his message, they invited him to their home and explained to him the way of God more adequately. So here you have an example of a woman, along with her husband, teaching a man, a learned man at that. So certainly women can teach men. Let me quickly see if I can slip in another call. Seth in El Dorado, Kansas, listening on the web. Hi, Seth.
Hey, Hank. It's been a while since we talked, like 5 years. Anyway.
Oh, wow.
In Exodus, after the children of Israel have escaped the hand of Pharaoh, they start to rebel pretty quickly, and God tells Moses, he speaks to Moses, and he says, I'm going to wipe them out. I'm just going to kind of paraphrase this. I'm going to wipe them out, and I'm going to you. And Moses is like, God forbid, you can't do this. If you're going to do this, take me with them as well. And I guess my question comes in, then how much more important are some of us among, I guess what you consider maybe like the 5% of people not going to an eternal damnation, to step up and say, I'm not going with a special elite 5% when 95% of all people are going to, be snuffed out or whatever.
Yeah, well, first of all, you got to remember that the biblical text that you refer to is an anthropomorphism, a condescension to human beings so that we can properly understand the ways of God. So we don't want to take that in the wrong sense, but rather in the sense in which it's intended. But remember, none of us are going to be snuffed out. All of us are going to live for all eternity, either in the presence of God or apart from Him. And that is a function of our will. We either choose to follow or we choose to reject. Without will, love would be rendered meaningless. Out of time? See you tomorrow.
Thank you for listening to the Bible Answer Man broadcast with Hank Hanegraaff. We've seen good times and hard times, but nothing quite like these times. The national and global ravages of the coronavirus pandemic have been nothing short of shocking. In such times, people desperately need hope and courage. Never Give Up, the story of a broken man impacting a generation by K.P. Yohannan, is the perfect book for this precise moment in history. To receive your copy of Never Give Up, simply call 888-7000-CRI and make a gift to support the Christian Research Institute's life-changing outreaches during the financially critical month of June. 888-7000-CRI or visit us at equip.org. You can also write CRI at Post Office Box 8500, Charlotte, North Carolina 28271. The Bible Answer Man broadcast is funded solely by listeners like you. We're on the air because truth matters and life matters more. The Christian Research Journal is CRI's award-winning magazine, combining eye-catching design with well-researched articles to equip believers in doctrine, defense, and discernment. The Christian Research Journal's primary commitment is to contend earnestly for the faith that was once for all delivered to the saints. In keeping with this commitment, the journal's mission is both evangelistic and pastoral, furthering the proclamation and defense of the historic gospel of Jesus Christ, and helping his followers distinguish between essential Christian doctrine and doctrine that is peripheral, aberrant, or heretical. In an age of subjectivism and moral relativism, may Christians ground their faith and values in the objective, reliable testimony of Holy Scripture. Start your subscription to the Christian Research Journal today. Call 888-7000-CRI or go online to equip.org. That's equip.org.